Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we conclude with Part 6, Chapter 5, The Mission of Christ and the Festival of the Fairies, from the Mystical Interpretation of Christmas by Max Heindel. Chapter 5, The Mission of Christ and the Festival of the Fairies. Whenever we are confronted by one of nature's mysteries, which we are at a loss to explain, we simply add a new name to our vocabulary, which we then use in learned juggling to hide our ignorance of the subject. Such are the ampere which we use to measure the volume of the electric current, the volt which we say indicates the strength of the current, and the ohm which we use to show what resistance a given conductor offers to the passage of the current. Thus, by much study of words and figures, the masterminds of the electrical science attempt to persuade themselves and others that they have fathomed the mysteries of the elusive force which plays such an important part in the world's work. But when all is said, and they are in a confidential mood, they admit that the brightest lights of the electrical science know but very little more than the schoolboy who is just beginning to experiment with his cells and batteries. Similarly, in the other sciences, anatomists cannot distinguish the canine from the human embryo for a long time. And while the physiologist talks learnedly about metabolism, he cannot escape the admission that the laboratory tests whereby he endeavors to imitate our digestive processes must be and are widely different from the transmutations undergone in the chemical laboratory of the body in the nourishment we take. This is not said to disparage or belittle the wonderful achievements of science, but to emphasize the fact that there are factors behind all manifestations of nature. Intelligences of varying degrees of consciousness, builders and destroyers who perform important parts in the economy of nature. And until these agencies are recognized and their work studied, we can never have an adequate conception of the way the nature forces work, which we call heat, electricity, gravity, chemical action, etc. To those who have cultivated the spiritual sight, it is evident that the so-called dead spend part of their time in learning to build bodies under the guidance of certain spiritual hierarchies. They are the agents in the metabolic and anabolic processes. They are the unseen factors in assimilation, and it is therefore literally true that we should be unable to live, save for this important aid from those we call dead. To grasp the idea of how these agencies work and their relation to us, we may recall an illustration used in the Cosmo. Suppose that a mechanic is at work making a table, and a dog, which is an evolving spirit belonging to another life wave, sits watching him. It then sees the process of cutting the boards. Gradually the table is formed from the material, and at last it is finished. But though the dog has watched the man work, it has no clear conception of how this has been done, nor of the ultimate use of the table. Suppose further that the dog were gifted with only a limited vision, hence unable to perceive the workman and his tools. Then it would have seen the boards gradually falling apart in certain places, then joined and assembled in another manner, until the table took shape and was finished. It would see the process of formation and the finished product, but would have no conception of the fact that the active agency of a workman was necessary to transform the lumber to a table. If it could speak, it might explain the origin of the table as Topsy did her own by saying that it just growed. Our relation to the nature forces is similar to that of the dog to the invisible workman, and we also are apt to explain nature's mysteries as Topsy did. We learnedly tell the child how heat from the sun evaporates the water of the rivers and oceans, causing it to ascend to the cooler regions of the air, where it condenses to clouds which finally become so saturated with moisture that they gravitate towards the earth as rain to replenish the rivers and oceans and be again evaporated. It is all perfectly simple, a nice automatic perpetual motion process, but is that all? Are there not a number of holes in this theory? We know that there are, though we cannot digress too far from our subject to discuss them. One thing is lacking to fully explain it, namely the semi-intelligent action of the sylphs who lift the finely divided vaporized particles of water prepared by the undines from the surface of the sea and carry them as high as they may before partial condensation takes place and clouds are formed. These particles of water they keep until forced by the undines to release them. When we say it storms, battles are being fought on the surface of the sea and in the air, sometimes with the aid of salamanders to light the lightning torch of separated hydrogen and oxygen, and send its awe-inspiring shaft crashing zigzag through the inky darkness, followed by ponderous peals of thunder that reverberate in the clearing atmosphere, while the undines triumphantly hurl the rescued raindrops to earth that they may be again restored to union with their mother element. The little gnomes are needed to build the plants and the flowers. It is their work to tint them with the innumerable shades of color which delight our eyes. They also cut the crystals in all the minerals and make the priceless gems that gleam from golden diadems. Without them, there would be no iron for our machinery, nor gold wherewith to pay for it. They are everywhere, and the proverbial bee is not busier. To the bee, however, is given credit for the work it does, while the little nature spirits that play such an immensely important part in the world's work are unknown save to a few so-called dreamers or fools. At the summer solstice, the physical activities of nature are at their apex or zenith. Therefore, Midsummer Night is the great festival of the fairies who have wrought to build the material universe, nourished the cattle, nurtured the grain, and are hailing with joy and thanksgiving the crest wave of force which is their tool in shaping the flowers into the astonishing variety of delicate shapes called for by their archetypes, and tinting them in unnumbered hues, which are the artist's delight and despair. On this greatest of all nights of the glad summer season, they flock from fen and forest, from glen and dale to the festival of the fairies. They really bake and brew their etheric foods, and afterwards dance in ecstasies of joy, the joy of having brought forth and served their important purpose in the economy of nature. It is an axiom of science that nature tolerates nothing that is useless. Parasites and drones are an abomination. The organ that has become superfluous atrophies, so does the limb or eye that is no longer used. Nature has work to do and requires work of all who would justify their existence and continue as part of her. This applies to plant and planet, man and beast, and to the fairies as well. They have their work to do. They are busy folk, and their activities are the solution to many of nature's multifarious mysteries, as already explained. We are now at the other pole of the yearly cycle, where the days are short and the nights long. Physically speaking, darkness hangs over the northern hemisphere, but the wave of spiritual light and life, which will be the basis of next year's growth and progress, is now at its greatest height and power. On Christmas night at the winter solstice, when the celestial sign of the Immaculate Virgin stands upon the eastern horizon at midnight, the Son of the New Year is born to save humanity from the cold and the famine which would ensue were its beneficent light withheld. At that time, the Christ Spirit is born into the earth and commences to leaven and fertilize the millions of seeds which the fairies build and water that we may have physical food. But man shall not live by bread alone. Important as is the work of the fairies, it fades into insignificance compared with the mission of Christ, who brings to us each year the spiritual food needed to advance us upon the path of progress, that we may attain perfection in love with all which that implies. It is the advent of this wonderful love light that we symbolize by the lighted lamps on the altar and the ringing of the Christmas bells which each year announce the glad tidings of the Savior's birth. For to the spiritual sense, light and sound are inseparable. The light is colored and the sound is modified according to vibratory pitch. The Christmas light that shines on earth is golden, inducing the feelings of altruism, joy, and peace which not even the Great War could entirely obliterate. The war is past, and as we always value that most which we have missed, it is to be hoped that all mankind will unite this Christmas in the Song of Songs. On earth peace, goodwill toward men. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.